So my name's Sandi Goddard. For those who already know me, I'm a business consultant. I work with mid-sized businesses that are looking to grow dramatically, and I work closely with the owners, the business leaders. And one of the things that I do is encourage them to raise their profile. And that's where David comes in, because obviously this is one of his skills. So there are all sorts of reasons why they might need to do this. If they're hoping to build a business in order to sell it, it's very important that the business has a face, and that face is the owner. So they may need to speak publicly, they may have to speak at networks, there may be a case to learn a new elevator pitch, all of these things. So if we start with David. David, perhaps you would like to introduce yourself, please.
My name is David Roylance. I am an Amazon best-selling author several times over. I am an award-winning coach. I won an award from Women in Banking and Finance in 2020. I had to attend a virtual award ceremony to receive my award that year. I was named one of the top 40 influencers for women in the banking space. And I run Speak to Shine International, where I teach people how to shine every time they speak so that they can use that as a skill and an art that allows them to have greater influence and earn significantly more money.
One of the things that David says is that entrepreneurs grow their business through the business stage. So, and he ensures that we connect through the power of our voice. So I'm going to ask David a range of questions. And
yes, go for it, Sandi.
oh, sorry, David, I'm busy letting people in.
No worries.
So my question to begin with is, how do you encourage someone who's really shy to accept? I have a client who we're working together growing her business. And I've been telling her she needs to now raise her personal profile, because she's an expert in the particular field that we're working in. And she's reluctant for all sorts of reasons. I'm not sure if speaking is one of them, but it may be. So if someone's shy,
well, speaking is the greatest fear that we have. And if anyone's read the book And Death Came Third, when I think it was the Times did the original research to find out what scared the British public the most in life, and death came third, and financial ruin came fourth, and public speaking came number one. Which I think is hysterical, because it means, when you're at the funeral and the person delivering the eulogy would rather be in the box than doing what they're doing right now, if that were the case. But I think public speaking is an example of leadership, taking to the stage and encouraging a group of people to stop everything that they're doing and all look at you at the same time is an example of leadership, and the confidence that you have to have around leadership to be able to do that. It's all based on facing the idea of rejection, because rejection is the real number one fear, that we'll be rejected by the tribe, because our brains haven't developed in any way since human beings lived in caves. And if we were rejected by the tribe, it would mean death. It would mean being thrown out into the cold. It would mean being eaten by some wild animal. You don't want to be rejected by the tribe, right? So there's a huge amount of risk in being the one that steps forward and goes, everyone stop what you're doing. Look at me. I know where the meat is. Follow me.
So I can do that speaking bit. So I can stand up at a lectern and speak, but my nerves are so bad that my hands shake the whole time.
Yes.
I can't possibly stand and hold a piece of paper.
Yes.
But I can project and speak. So what exercise, what would you do about that?
Excellent. It has to start with the breath. Breath is everything in terms of how we show up. How your breathing defines the entirety of your physicality. So how your breathing defines whether you shake. How your breathing defines how nerves or nervousness has an impact on your body. And your body shows the world what's going on for you. So I often start with a little diagram with clients where I say there are three things we're all doing, or every single one of us who's alive on this planet. Three things we are always doing. We are always thinking, we're always feeling, and we're always doing something. Even if that doing something is sleeping, there's still a lot of thinking and feeling going on whilst we're asleep. We just don't know about it. And under normal circumstances, doing is the only thing that other people see. Under normal circumstances, when we as human beings are comfortable, we're in flow, other people see what we're doing and what we're thinking and what we're feeling. We can keep absolutely private to ourselves. But the moment that we step out of our comfort zone and start doing something that makes us nervous because we're unsure how it's going to land, we don't know that we can do this well, we're afraid of being rejected by an audience, we're afraid of being judged, whatever it is, the moment that we step out of that comfort zone, all our behavior, the doing part, starts to reveal to everybody what we're thinking and how we're feeling. Does that make sense? So what you're describing when you say I can project, but I have nerves that mean that I can't hold a piece of paper. The answer to that is working through the physicality via the breath. We've got two different nervous systems. A normal nervous system and a fight or flight nervous system. And they're controlled by the vagus nerve. And anyone familiar with the vagus nerve and the idea of the vagus nerve?
I think you need to tell us.
Well, that's, in a sense, all you need to know. The vagus nerve defines which of our nervous systems we are using at any time. And the vagus nerve is looking at how we're breathing, and it's looking at how's the heart doing, in order to make a decision about which nervous system we should be using. The normal, we're calm nervous system, or the fight or flight nervous system. So if we're in fight or flight, we're breathing shallowly, usually in the chest. The heart rate is high, the blood is pumping. I don't know if that's a familiar feeling to anyone. And that's where the shakes are going to come from, because you're not grounded. Your energy is kind of top heavy up here, and the chest is probably extremely tight. You're struggling to find breath. Yes, you might be able to project if you're breathing like that, but almost certainly you're damaging your voice at some level. Now, and I know in a lot of particularly masculine speaking spaces like the property industry, property development industry, lots of very alpha male speakers, they can project, but they often lose their voices after they've done like a 3-day seminar. I know it's quite common to do 3-day seminars when you're selling something really big. And I know of many of those speakers who would do the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then on Monday they wouldn't be able to speak because they've been pushing their voice from the chest. So the first thing that I'll do with every client is look at how can we drop that breath down into the stomach. You breathe in the stomach, you breathe low, you breathe slow. The heart rate comes down, and the vagus nerve switches your nervous system, so you can then do all the things that you would be able to do normally, but suddenly find that you can't do when you're stepping out of your, not necessarily can't, but things are much harder when you step out of your comfort zone and you think, I'm doing something new. Uh, and that has to be step number one. And it's about being able to be present. If I can give you all an example. I used to work with a chap many years ago, must be about 25 years ago now, who ran a pharmaceuticals company, and he'd worked through the company from the very bottom of the company to becoming CEO. And when he became CEO, he believed fervently that every Monday morning should begin with him presenting to the entirety of the company. So he'd gather, 50 employees and say, this is where we're at and what have you. And one morning he stepped up on stage. One Monday morning he went absolutely silent, couldn't think of a thing to say, turned to his number two, went, Sandy, take over, and then vanished back to his office, saying to himself, that must never happen again. And next Monday morning, exactly the same thing happened. And the Monday morning after that. And eventually I got called in to do some work with him. He was there in his office, and I said to him, how do you start preparing for these presentations that you're doing? And he went over to his whiteboard and he said, I come off stage and I go straight here and I write this. And he wrote on his whiteboard in pen the words, and forgive me, everyone, for some grown-up language, this must not be shit. And I went, wow, that's fascinating. Because, looking at it, if you imagine looking at a whiteboard with those words written on it, how do you think you're going to be thinking, and how do you think you're going to be feeling? Because the brain's unable to accommodate a negative. And to prove my point, please, everyone, whatever you do right now, do not think of a blue elephant in a tree. Right? So the brain has to create something in order to erase it. Does that make sense? So he may have written, this must not be shit, but actually his brain is only capable of reading, this must be shit. And if you imagine that for a week as being the main visual focus in his office whilst he's thinking about this challenge, then it's no wonder that, if he's been thinking and feeling that way for a week, then what the brain does is it gives you what it thinks you want, and it chooses what it thinks you want on the basis of what you've been spending your time thinking about. So I don't know. Yes, go on.
We told everyone that this is about impact.
Yeah.
One of the things that obviously I want my clients to make an impact. So,
Yes.
when I'm talking about raising their profile, I want them to do it with credibility, authenticity, but it has to be impactful. So you have a procedure, process, don't you? Your 3 pillars of impact.
I do. Posture, voice, and energy. And the idea is those are the 3 pillars of being able to resonate as the most openly authentic and confident version of yourself. Now, my background is the theatre, and I trained as a professional actor back in the early 1990s at Guildhall School of Music and Drama, which then was one of the top 3 conservatoire trainings that you could get anywhere in the world. And I ran a theatre company into the ground, I have to say. As a director, I made some lovely work, but I didn't know how to get anyone to come to it. So I lost a lot of money doing a lot of work that I think would have gone down very well if I'd been able to market and sell back in those days. So I've taken those skills that I've learned there and melded them with a lot of the skills that I've learned in both personal and professional development to be able to allow people not to be someone else, not to be impressive, but to be authentically confident on the basis that the more authentic and confident we are, the more we put our audiences at ease. Uh, so that's the process has to be around how are you showing up physically, which then defines how are you showing up vocally, all of which defines how are you showing up energetically. So I give you an example. I feel there are three different circles of energy that a human being can transmit. And as human beings, we're moving from one of these circles of energy to another, to another, to another, moment by moment through life. Most of us will never know that we are doing that. But only one of those three circles of energy is a state of presence, a state of having charisma for other people. And it is the state where you are most tall, most balanced, most grounded. So I call the first circle of energy the introvert state. It's when we kind of go backwards. It's where we take our energy back, and then we become invisible when we're in that state. And what happens when we're in that state is we then short circuit our own fears around being ignored. So we take a step back, or we energetically move back, and we become soft focus, if not completely invisible. But then we don't get asked questions. We don't get noticed when our hand is in the air. We get ignored. And almost all, particularly the women I've worked with in both the banking space and the health space, all have this backwards energy, the introvert state energy. And you'll never be noticed when you're in that space. Now, let me jump. I'm going to go to the third state of energy, which I don't call the extrovert state, but I call the convincing state. When people are pushing too hard, when people are trying too hard to be convincing, and if anyone in the room has ever been sold something badly, go on, raise a hand if you've ever been sold too badly, like a secondhand car. You know what it's like when someone's trying to convince you, no, this is for you. This car's got your name written all over it, kind of push, push, push. That's not a state of presence. That's the convincing state. Now, what's fascinating about both of these things, the introvert state and the convincing state, is although they're being articulated to the world differently, they're internally exactly the same state. They're breath in the chest, high heart rate. Yes. And almost entirely working without the fullness of the frontal lobe of your brain. So you've got no flexibility, and your energy is either one of invisibility or one of pushing people away. In the middle is that second circle, which is the state of presence. And the way that you define that is by noticing where you're breathing. If you're suddenly in a state of balance, if your center of gravity is inside your body, you are breathing in the stomach, your heart rate comes down, the hypothalamus, the back of the brain, the fight or flight mechanism will release lots of oxygen into the frontal lobe of the brain, which means you can do lots of clever thinking. You can remember everything that you've prepared. You can be flexible. You can respond to the moment that you're in. And also only when the breath is in the stomach can you access the entirety of your vocal range.
So one of the other questions I was going to ask you is about public speaking, and I see that May has come up with one that fits in very nicely with that.
Yes.
So when you're public speaking, what's the best way to stand on stage? Project your voice. So the question says, should I do deep stomach breathing at the beginning before I come on stage? Do I
Yes.
need to schedule pauses during the speech for breathing? Would the audience know I'm doing some deep breathing? So there you are, a whole load of questions around breathing and public speaking.
Great, great questions. Lovely. The more you prepare yourself on an everyday basis with your breathing, the less you will need to do specific deep breathing before you go on stage. My advice, though, would be to find a little space that belongs to you, maybe lock yourself in the bathroom for a couple of minutes in order to ground your breath. And then you will be absolutely rooted when you stand on stage. And you want to be rooted so that if you do move on a stage, that movement has some kind of meaning. Because in real life, we only move to fulfill an outcome that we want. Otherwise, we don't move. So, oh, I fancy a coffee. Boom, boom, off I go and move. Oh, I need the bathroom. Move. Oh, there's my wife at the door. I'll go and open it. We only move when we have something that we want to achieve through that movement. The thing that happens with nervous people on stage is that nervous energy goes through the legs and the feet and becomes sort of like a strange little dance that then reveals to the audience your discomfort at being where you are, your nervousness, and it makes them nervous too, because they're like all human beings, rapport building. So we pick up energies from the people who are most dominant in any situation. And because we're rapport building, we will model what we're being shown. So a nervous speaker will make an audience nervous. A confident speaker will make an audience confident. Now, there was another question in there, wasn't there, about about taking specific breaths?
Right.
Yes.
And will the when should they be scheduled in, and when would the audience see you doing it?
Would the audience notice? Here's the thing. I think taking a breath and scheduling a breath through rehearsal, through rehearsing out loud what you're going to say, is a really good idea, because the silence is the space that your audience catches up. And it's also the moment that you can reground yourself. So you take the breath and you give the audience pause, everybody wins.
So
Because they get to catch up.
one of the things that we probably all do, I'm sure everyone here is a consummate networker, but
Yes.
I think sometimes we forget that networking is also public speaking. And, you know, are elevator pitches out of fashion now? I mean, generally speaking, when I'm networking, I'm trying to build a relationship. I'm not actually selling to someone. I know when I started networking 100 years ago, I was sent out in order to sell, and
Yeah.
networking was seen as another form of sales. But so what's your take on that?
Networking, networking is the second quickest route to cash for any business. The quickest is your old client base, by the way. But once you've exhausted that, networking is the quickest way to establish your credibility and your being a three-dimensional individual that people can remember. Now, the mistake that people often make is thinking that networking is sales. Networking is marketing.
Mm.
And when people use networking as sales, hi, I'm David, and here's my card, and you need me. Well, you haven't, you haven't. This is what I do. You need me. Call me tomorrow. I'll whatever it is. The moment people step into sales, whilst they're networking, then you're in that third circle of energy. You're pushing people away. So elevator pitches should only be about two things. They should be about attention. Hello, I'm David, I'm over here. Hello, there's Sandy, she's over there, right? And curiosity. Right? If we start trying to make people interested through our elevator pitch, we're lost. We're in sales and we're lost. People will want to move on because it's not about them. People don't care what you do until they know what you can do for them. So elevator pitches, I think, elevator pitches are excellent as long as they're focused on how can I help you? And that's the way to, and of course, helping somebody isn't necessarily about selling what you've got because, well, you don't know what they need. Yeah. So it's very much more about building that kind of relationship. They say, wasn't it BNI say, you know, that it's networking is about knowing, liking, and trusting. And knowing and liking is easy. It's the trusting bit that takes time. So the trusting bit is about consistently showing up and embodying the values that you want other people to see.
So again, the content, the way we speak to people in that situation, content is equally valuable as showing confidence and trustworthiness.
Yes, yeah, yes, it is. And it's not how people make a first impression, but it's about how people remember you. So in the years that I've taught networking to people, I say you're not trying to sell to the room. Imagine you've got a room of 20 people who you network with. If you try and sell to those people directly, your networking career is going to be very short. But it's like every single one of those 20 people have got one of these, and inside one of these is probably between 200 and 500 names and telephone numbers. You're marketing so that you're creating a sales force out of all the other people in the room, whilst they're beautifully being a sales force for you. So I think it was Rachel said something in the chat about being more comfortable networking than public speaking. Did I get that right?
Hang on, I've missed that one. Yes, she feels much more comfortable networking than public speaking.
Of course, because it's more obvious that when you're networking, that you're there to try and help other people and you're showing an interest in other people. Now, what's fascinating with public speaking is what the fear of rejection is, the fear that I am going to be rejected. And what I've taught all my clients who take to the stage is that actually you're doing the same thing that you're doing networking. You're just doing it one to many. You're sharing value by giving an audience something you believe is going to be valuable to them. So it's even that is not about you. It's about how I can help you with the skills that I have. And can I get you curious enough to want to engage with me properly about whether that outcome is something that you're willing to pay for?
So another question I have, it's around public speaking, but the difference between online and physically standing on a stage and speaking to people or presenting. So is there a difference? How would we?
There is, and the difference is that we're in two dimensions here. And what that means is in three dimensions, we're in a room together, the eyes can move, we can check whether we're safe all the time, we see the whole of the body. We come to a Zoom room or a Teams room or whichever, and suddenly we're confined by this 1.85 to 1 image that we're all used to from watching film and television, where we only get to see a little bit of the body. Now, the conscious mind knows that we're all in different rooms, but the unconscious mind does not. So the unconscious mind is constantly looking for all the information that's missing. And that's why it's more difficult to build trust in the online space than it is in the real world. And what I do is I operate from a standing desk. So that means that when I'm speaking, people can see almost the entirety of the top half of my body. So, and in particular, these two fellas here, the hands, because the hands are what the unconscious mind needs to see in order to know that they're not being threatened. Now, if the unconscious mind is nervous, it takes all of your oxygen from the frontal lobe and stores it at the back. And if it's not being threatened, it restores all that oxygen back into the frontal lobe. I think I might have mentioned that before. That's the key. You've got to have all this oxygen here so that you can start connecting with the people you've got in front of you rather than being intent on your own safety. And really that is how it is different. It'll take a little bit longer to build the level of trust in a two-dimensional space than it will do in a three-dimensional space.
Diego says, how can you voice override what your eyes are saying about your fears or limiting perceptions?
I guess the thing is, it's about the feelings and the capture of the feelings rather than about the eyes. Because if you're in that, what I call the second circle, the state of presence, what it allows you to do is see the world as it really is, rather than worse, rather than better. And it allows you to see what's actually going on in front of you. The voice comes from the breath. I often do a lot of work in Alexander technique. I don't know, is anyone familiar with Alexander technique in the room? Alexander technique was developed by an Australian actor named Alexander as a system of releasing tension associated with the spine that tension lifts the breath into the chest, and it makes it difficult when it's there to be able to resonate with any kind of calm or authenticity. And so we do a lot of work, and wonderfully on my team at Speak to Shine, I have an amazing lady named Katja Benjamin who taught me Alexander technique when I was at Guildhall, and now works for me. She's Alexander technique teacher at RADA, and so I send all my clients who are based in London round to her Hampstead flat to do some work on grounding the breath, because I cannot say it too many times. The breath defines how you show up and what other people see and hear, and as a result, experience. So it is the number one key to being able to resonate with a voice, is the breath. And how you breathe will change how you view the world that's in front of you.
So we've got about 25 minutes left.
Yes.
My financial brain is rubbish, but I'm pretty certain I'm right. So I'm going to allow everyone to unmute themselves. And I'm hoping I've done the right thing with the Zoom. Yes, okay. Yeah. So they can actually talk to you and ask you questions.
Hello, everyone.
So I don't know if it's working. Dan's unmuted. Yeah, I think you have to unmute yourselves. Yeah. So, right, Dan's got a question.
Yeah, Dan's got a question. Superb.
Hello. Firstly, I just want to say really good presentation today. I thought that was really insightful and lots of things to think about and take away. And I'm generally quite a confident person as well. So as well as running DAP Consultancy, which is a customer experience consulting business, it's all around engaging with customers, making sure customers are happy, making sure that you retain those customers, they keep coming back. I did my degree in music, and I've been signed twice in two bands. So I'm quite used to getting up on stage and playing and singing in front of hundreds of people. And as well as running this company, I'm also a radio presenter, and I present a monthly business radio show. And the thing is that I find quite interesting. It's like now talking to all of you, I'm completely fine with. I can talk on the radio to 20,000 people. It doesn't bother me. Stand up in front of 1,000 people and sing. But what I get more nervous about is when it's intimate. So if I had to do a report back to a client and it was just me and that client, I'd be way more nervous talking to that one client on a one-to-one basis than I would be standing up in front of 50,000 people and talking. So obviously when there's all those techniques, like you said, taking those breaths, moving, being obviously agile, you've got to over exaggerate because it's on the stage and things. Whereas how would you kind of best recommend dealing with those kind of not fears, but kind of anxieties, kind of concerns when it's a smaller group, like a one-to-one?
I wonder if that's the same fear of rejection that most other people get when they're speaking uh, to tens of people or hundreds of people. That, especially if it's a client and it may be an early engagement just after they've made their first payment. Dan, is that correct?
Well, sometimes it's like, for example, I acquired a new client about a month ago, and I can talk to all of his team very well because I know they're kind of peers. But whenever I have a one-to-one meeting with him to have like a progress update meeting, I'm always very, very nervous, even though I've got no reason to. He's a lovely person.
Yes.
I'm confident in what my abilities are. I'm confident in what I'm going to deliver. I already know going into that room, he's going to be satisfied and happy with what I've got to say. But I still can't help but get nervous.
It's interesting. And there's something that in that instance it is hitting your fight or flight mechanism. There's something about that scenario that you probably learned whilst you were very young. That the hypothalamus has learned that that's a shortcut that it does to keep you out of some kind of danger. Now, there's when I am nervous about the outcome of a call, for instance, what I'll often do is I'll kind of visualize the three different ways that a call could go. And I'll throw up like a little imaginary movie screen on the wall in front of me, and I'll run a movie of me making the call and the call going the worst possible way that the call could go. They don't want to work with me. They think I'm an idiot. They think I'm completely not credible. I hear them saying it. I watch myself taking it. And then I watch myself putting the phone down and leaving the room and my life being pretty much exactly as it was before. Now then, I'll tear that movie screen down and throw up another second one where the call goes well. And the person says, yes, here, where, do you want my money now? You know, and then me celebrating. And then I'll do it one last time, a new movie screen, and on it, myself making the call and the other person who is on the call in a bubble. And nothing inside the bubble can get out, and nothing outside the bubble can get in. And what those three, it means that my brain has visualized every single way that the call can go. And you can do this with a presentation, you can do this with a client engagement. You visualize every which way. Look, if it did go badly, what would you do to fix that, Dan? If it went badly, could you fix it? Right? So it's knowing that whatever you're going into won't kill you. That's what your hypothalamus is. It just wants to know that you're not going to die. Right? Your hypothalamus has two different modes, alive or dead. That's it. And its job is to keep you alive. It does not care how you feel. and it will make you feel absolute hell on earth in order to stop you doing something that it has defined is a threat to you, a threat to life. Right?
Another way of doing that is that I certainly do it with my clients is pretending you're on a balcony looking in at yourself at that meeting. So there are lots of ways of doing this, and it's really worth trying it out and seeing if it works for yourself. I know Rachel had a question. She had her hand up for a while.
Thank you, everybody.
Dan, thank you. Rachel, please.
Hello, Rachel? Are you muted?
I didn't have a question.
Oh.
But however, so I haven't. However, maybe an observation I can share with everybody. Presenting virtually has been the making of me, because I've always had a problem with public speaking. Don't like doing it. Can network, because I don't mind people just throwing anything at me. Anything, doesn't matter. But putting me on a stage and feeling the pressure of having to deliver, that's where I come unstuck. Oh, actually, funnily enough, I don't. Everyone says I'm brilliant at it, but internally, I don't feel brilliant at all. So internal versus external. However, I think the comment that I wanted to make, the observation, is since we've been doing so many virtual presentations, I do them all day, every day. Now, when I go to a face-to-face, I almost pretend I'm on Zoom. And it's incredible. I almost think, just pretend you're behind a camera, and it's shifted my confidence so much. Just that little thing, just that thought. So yeah, just thought I'd share.
Thank you,
Maybe
Rachel.
Dan should think of himself on stage or on the radio.
Maybe, yes, that's a great idea.
So, is anyone else? Diego's
Yes.
got a question for you.
And Mai as well has got a question. Diego, we'll go to you first, and then.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you to both of you. My question is the following. I'm very conscious of my voice because, of
Yes.
course, English is not my first language, and I want to try to communicate in an assertive way. So for me, that constant consciousness of the voice
Yes.
means that I always on a platform, right?
Yeah.
Whereas it's networking or presenting something. So my question is there any tip? Because I think at the moment that when we are out in whatever circumstances, especially we work for ourselves, we have our own business, we are always in a marketing on situation.
Correct.
I think that we should not avoid that. We cannot avoid that. The point is doing that in a very natural and relaxed way. So my question is there any tip that you can give us for us to be able to keep that voice either in networking, meeting, presentations,
Yeah.
or the voice have always, or as many times as is possible, to have an impact in what we are saying. So what we're saying resonates with whatever we have in front of us. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Thank you. We're born with this huge range that we learn. You know, we come into this world screaming, and then with this huge range, and then we learn to use less and less of it through the stories that we tell ourselves in our own head. Now, a lot of stories come from our parents early in life, and from the people we're most surrounded with, our educators, who will say unhelpful things like the answer's not out the window, David. You know, maybe it is actually. Do you know what I mean? We learn all these structures that the hypothalamus again learns to turn into a shortcut. And so there are lots of stories that we can tell ourselves that shut the voice down. Well, it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous because if people can hear I have an accent, or people hear that it's not English is not my first language. What will that mean? So we come back to the fear of rejection, right? Now, there's two things. One is getting those muscles that are in the V shape of the groin working, because those muscles are the muscles that will power your voice. You will never lose your voice if you are breathing using those muscles to power the voice that comes out of your mouth. You use them, you'll be able to access the entirety of your range. So I break the full range of the voice into 3 different areas, what I call the warrior voice, the lower notes, the heart voice, the center of the voice, and the head voice, the highest notes that we can do. And if you can breathe using the V of the groin, using the muscles deep in the V of the groin to push the air out when you breathe out, then you will be able to access the entirety of the range of notes that are available to you here. And if you breathe from there whilst you speak, you cannot hurt your voice. If you breathe from the chest, when you speak, you'll bruise the vocal folds here, and your voice will dry up. And then what happens is people say, "Oh, I've got laryngitis," when they don't have laryngitis. They've just been pushing from the chest. And learning to breathe in that way, which is why I come back to the Alexander technique, and I always send my clients to my Alexander technique associate, is you learn how to do that automatically. I always say to my clients, I never want you thinking about your voice when you're actually working. I want you to do all of this work in isolation. That means that all of this is naturally working for you when you're working. So all you have to do is concentrate on building the relationship with the people you're in conversation with, in the Zoom room with, in the audience when you're presenting to them. You're building a relationship. You're creating a loop. When I was in drama school and I was learning about Shakespeare from Patsy Rodenberg, who my voice mentor, and I had a real realization why some actors sound absolutely dreadful when they're doing Shakespeare monologues, and why some actors sound absolutely amazing. And the ones who are dreadful are just talking out because, oh gosh, there's a lot of speech. There's a page and a half of speech. So I'm just going to talk it out and sound impressive. To be or not to be? That is the question. And the people who are really good at it understand it's a loop. You're talking to an audience. You're in a duologue, but only one of you speaking. And if you remember who you're talking to, and you do it for them rather than yourself, then it's amazing. So I don't want people focused inwards on their own performance when they're performing. I want them focused outwards on the people that they are there to serve in any conversation. Does that answer your question, Diego?
Yes, sir, yes. But the reason why I answer in that way is because I feel that when you are talking all the time, as I said, to clients, to network, etc., there must be something that you can do, and you understand the breathing technique and all
Yes.
that. But there is something, I guess, that you can do for keeping your voice always. I don't know, it's just related to the breathing. Probably that's the question, where you are, sounds to be arrogant, but yeah, I don't find another word, that your voice is memorable.
Yes.
So what you're
Yeah.
saying,
So are you thinking of the content rather than?
But I think it's associated because
Yeah.
I think that a great voice saying something that is not that brilliant looks brilliant.
Well,
Yes.
I think you have a brilliant voice and a very memorable voice.
Oh, that's very kind.
Genuinely. I think Mai has a question, and I'm keeping an eye on the time, so
Of course.
So, David, a really great presentation and lots of things to think about. So I've got a presentation I need to do tomorrow, which is a hybrid version.
Yes.
I want to maybe pick up on two things. One is the voice, because you mentioned about the three different voices. So tomorrow, because I'm the moderator for the event, so I just need to introduce and make the session really interesting. Personally, I'm really excited about it. So I'm gonna have quite an energetic, exciting style, you know, you're in for a treat, that sort of thing. What sort of voice should I use? The other one is my hand gestures. So when I observe myself looking back, I noticed that my hand is always waving around and it's always very predictable like this. I'm going to be holding my microphone in one, so that's fixed, so that's okay. The other one, shall I just keep it still and only when I emphasize something, I can just say like, oh, you're in for a treat, 1, 2, 3, rather than just like constantly waving like this.
Yes. Now, if you're so what it suggests to me, the constant wave suggests a tension.
Yes.
That's here in the shoulders. If there's a tension in the shoulders, then the breath is in the chest.
Yes,
yeah?
Absolutely. You spotted.
So the moment you're breathing in the stomach, any movement you make comes from your core.
Mm.
So any movement that you make that comes from your core is an authentic movement. So it's not distracting. Any movement that you make when the shoulders are tense, that begin in the shoulders, become a distraction and make it difficult for people to hold eye contact with you. Yeah? So the warrior voice is the voice of credibility. And so it's the lower notes in the voice. The credibility is succinct. It's really clear, and it uses the smallest number of words to get to the point. So the warrior voice is the voice for delivering information.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we have an hour, this is what's going to happen. You know, David will speak for 40 minutes, and then in the last 20 minutes, it'll all be open to you. So you go, oh, okay, that's what's going to happen. They take time seriously. They know what they're doing. You're subconsciously sending the message, I've got this and I can handle it, whatever it is. Then the heart voice is the voice of seeking information. So the heart voice is the center of the voice. Heart voice is where you go when you ask questions.
See.
Yeah. The head voice, use sparingly. And by the way, never ever use the head voice in one-to-one conversation because it makes people go away. It's so high. Right? But the head voice, the higher notes in the voice can be extremely useful when you're presenting to groups because the head voice is big emotions. So I see people selling on stage all the time using these big emotions, and there's only 75 tickets available, and you've got to go move now. That's where people go, to those very high notes. You create big emotions in a room with the head voice, but it only works with groups, and it never works on a one-to-one basis. So the main thing is to think about when I need to be credible and go, hi, this is my name, this is what I do, this is what's going to happen. And when you're going, yeah, so now we'd like to hear from, I see that Mai's got a question. I see that Diego's got a question. So we go up naturally. Yes? And that's what I mean about breaking the voice down into those three areas. And again, when you work on your voice on a consistent basis, you don't need to think about any of this. Right? So what you have to remember is that one autumn in 1990, I didn't have a clue about any of this, and I was learning it for the first time, and I was really terrible. And, you know, my teachers at Guildhall were despairing for about a year. Often I would hear the expression, take him away and get me someone who can do this. do you know what I mean? But you do it enough to then be able to not have to think about it. And the same way that anyone learns a skill, we have to think about it consciously first, You know, when you're learning how to drive, there comes a moment where you can't approach a roundabout without going through in your head what you have to do approaching the roundabout. And then you've been doing it 6, 7 weeks with an instructor, and then you can approach a roundabout and talk about what's for dinner tonight. There
So
we
we have
go.
4 minutes left. Stephanie made a point, which I love, which is
Yes.
that Diego should embrace his voice and go with it, because we love accents in this country. Well, I certainly do.
Yes.
And Stephanie says she's remembered as the mad French lady. I'm sure that's not. Alan had his hand up, but before I go to Alan, I'm just going to throw in our little bit of sales, which is in the chat. You have my email address and David's. We also are running a training course for newly qualified lawyers on the
26th of this month.
At the IOD, and it's a morning, 9 o'clock till 12. So if you know any law firms that might value this, we'd really appreciate a share, please. And then David and I are doing another webinar on the 15th of July. David will host that one. And so feel free, we'd love to see you there, but you will get reminders.
Yes, please join us if you want to on that date. That'd be
3
wonderful.
minutes left. Alan.
Alan, go for it.
It's a very quick scenario that I faced a few years ago. As a business, we helped organizations move their people across international borders. And every year we had to do the payroll calculations or the pay review for all of these people. And one year we really screwed up and we made some miscalculations which were costing the company money. The group HR director summoned me to go and see him in Sweden. And I was obviously very nervous about how we're going to come out of this, because their business represented about 70% of our revenue. And I don't know what made me do it, but I walked into his room with my hands up.
Yeah.
That took all the sting away from it. You know, it wasn't about explaining why it had happened. I'd admitted what had,
Yeah.
and when he left the company and I went over to see him and took him out for lunch, he said, "You're one of the bravest people I've ever seen," because not many people would actually admit it before we'd actually started talking. So I just wanted
That's
to
very
share
good.
that.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I mean, you've got to take it all on the chin, and you've got to be honest with people, haven't you? And say,
and it was a risk, but I was prepared to take the risk.
But and again, the fear around that is the fear of rejection, the fear of being told off.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so what's the worst that can happen? You get told off and you leave the room, and your life is pretty normal. Other than that,
the worst that could have happened is you're fired.
Yeah. But I'll bet, Alan, you would have been able to find something else. Very good. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, and I hope everyone's, well, now you know how wonderful David is, if you didn't already. So, you know, and you know where to find him because you've got his email address and his LinkedIn